laminitis, you've got some new advancements.
Yeah, so there's been some big breakthroughs in the understanding of the disease in recent times. So the traditional understanding was that it was all feed related, and the horse would graze some sugar-filled pasture, some fructose-filled pasture, and that would, through the fermentation process through the gut, that would alter chemicals that were produced, would alter the vascular supply to the hoof, which would result in laminitis, whereby the soft tissue connections within the hoof capsule are damaged, and the attachments supporting the pedal bone, or the foot bone within the hoof, are lost, and the foot bone rotates and floats within the hoof capsule and ends up rotating down and putting pressure on the sole of the foot from the inside.
And is exceedingly painful.
Very, very painful, and anyone who knows anything about horses will understand that it's one of the most distressing things to see a horse go through. So although we realise that is mechanically what happens, there's been some pretty big advancements on understanding why we have especially older horses and maybe some over fat horses that are very predisposed to this condition. And it's not all about pasture sugar levels after all. And in actual fact, probably even in my opinion, maybe the largest proportion, or the majority of these cases that we've thought of as being nutritional, probably fall into one of these two new disease categories. And one of them is called equine Cushing's-like disease. We say Cushing's-like because it mimics a disease called Cushing's disease that we see in other species. And it's caused through a swelling or overproduction of cells within the pituitary gland, which sits in the base of the brain, and that results in an excessive secretion of a hormone that causes the stress hormone cortisol to be secreted by the adrenals, and that in itself has effects on the vascular supply to the foot.
So it's almost as though it's a stress-related thing.
Exactly, a stress. I guess it's inadvertently a stress-related disease by default. So under normal stress situations, the pituitary gland would stimulate the adrenals to produce the stress hormone cortisone. And in this situation, without the stress, the pituitary gland's going berserk and producing a lot of this hormone. And actually it's thought to occur in actually just to some degree in just about every aging horse. So in a way it's probably a normal part of the aging process of a horse, but now of course they're living longer, we're seeing this disease more readily. And up until now it's been a very difficult disease, one, to diagnose, and two, to treat. And that's changed dramatically just in the last year or so. So diagnosis has been made a lot easier with a very simple blood test, looking for the stimulating hormone, the hormone that this pituitary produces. In the past, it used to be quite a drawn-out process, quite dynamic, involving multiple blood tests and giving medication and then taking blood tests at varying times. Quite a complicated scenario. But more importantly, once the diagnosis is established, there's just been released in the last few months a new medication that is very cost effective, given daily to the horse and or pony, and it virtually abolishes the symptoms. So revolutionary, and actually will go a long way, hopefully, to abolish some of these long-term founder or laminitis cases that we've seen.
So this is a cure rather than a prevention, though?
It's a lot. I guess it can't be called a cure because it's required long term, so it would be needed to be given for the life of the horse, but very cost effective, and for a beloved family pony or a horse that's given a great many years of service to a rural family, and is much loved and had a very big connection. It's just going to revolutionise.
So it just eases all the symptoms.
Absolutely. Actually, the symptoms of Cushing's are virtually abolished, and hence this high predisposition to laminitis, which is one of the major symptoms of pituitary or disease or Cushing-like disease in horses, should be well managed. So it's going to be a great way forward for our old equine mates out there.
So let's turn the whole thing on its head.
Absolutely. And I guess the other, I outlaid that there were two big shifts in the understanding of laminitis, and the other one is this is this disease called equine metabolic syndrome, which we've talked about in the past. It's actually very, very similar and actually almost identical in the way things work to type 2 diabetes in humans. And one of the effects of this disease in horses, again, is the effects that it has on insulin secretion, and that has a carry-on effect to the blood supply to the hoof, and we get the same laminitic effects. And again, we've now got a much simpler understanding of this disease, which is quite a newly understood disease anyway. It can be tested for very readily now with a very simple process of involving giving a set amount of glucose or sugar to the animal and measuring insulin levels in the blood, just like we do in humans with type 2 diabetes. And the treatments, there's very well understood exercise and feeding programs in place, which actually obviously are going to be very, very cheap and very effective in managing this condition. And in the really bad cases, or the cases where people maybe can afford a little bit more financial input, some of these type 2 diabetic type medications that are used in people, we can use them in these equine metabolic patients. So metformin, these sort of medications, under the right advice from the vet in conjunction with sort of sorting out the dietary management and exercise. Again, gonna revolutionise the treatment of these older or aging equines, or their little fat podgy ponies that are always predisposed to this disease. So,
do we still keep our equine off clover?
Yes, especially I think the traditional horses that we always thought too much green grass, too much clover, too much rapidly growing grass and rapidly growing seasons with high sugar contents. Probably the majority of those cases have been equine metabolic syndrome patients, and so now that we have a better understanding of that, the key to moving forward with that is firstly the suspicion, and hopefully everyone who has anything to do with horses after looking at this and listening to this will understand a little bit further, and maybe that might stimulate the brain to go, maybe that is what's going on. Talk to the vet. First thing is establish the diagnosis, and then it's plain sailing. Once the diagnosis is established, we can go through all the options and sort these things out. And again, for about the third time, as far as welfare of these old mates, and I've got a soft spot for the equines.
Yes, you do. Always have.
I think that it's gonna be the greatest thing for the welfare of these old creatures. Yeah.
So, talk to your vet. Do it early.
Yeah,
and move fast.
Absolutely, and get the important thing, like all of these situations, is just confirm the diagnosis. Once we know what we're dealing with, then it's usually plain sailing. The understanding of these conditions, as I've alluded to today, is just going ahead in leaps and bounds. So
brilliant, Nick. Thank you very much indeed.